The sights, the sounds, the tastes, the feelings, and the smells of London can't be captured in a travel itinerary or travel tips. That's why today I'm bringing you on my London adventure through all 5 senses so you can feel like you're right here with me through the street. I'm Michael, and this is A Sense of Travel. Let's do London. I fell in love with London the moment I emerged from the underground tube onto Blackfriars station a few years ago. So much so that it completely changed my life. It was in this moody, often cloudy, melancholic, regal, elegant, royal, and rather mysterious city across the ocean that I boldly decided to move as far away from my hometown as I could. The novel scents, the unique sounds of the city, the genuine centuries-old architecture, and a tangible ambience that can only be experienced in London set me on a mission to document all 5 senses of as many cities, countries, and natural wonders around the world as I possibly can. How could a single visit to a single city have this kind of an impact? What is it that makes London so mesmerizing, so addictive, and just so perfect? Well, to answer these questions, we're taking a journey through all 5 senses into central London, exploring the deep lore of London past, experiencing the magic of the wizarding world, and, of course, the tastes that capture the London experience. Well, to kick off, there's no better place to start than in the heartbeat of the city. London is huge. In fact, over 14 million people live within the Greater London area. The culmination of that humongous population sits right in the heart of the most bustling part of town. So, what better place for us to start? The city of Westminster, London's central borough, is a visual masterpiece and almost overwhelming to the senses. The sea of old brick in various shades of brown, handsome marble, and decorative gray stone is filled with some of the world's most recognized monuments, buildings, institutions, and parks. Here, the silhouette of domes, pointy steeples, fairy tale-like spires and turrets, and old Victorian chimneys evoke royal, magical, and eclectic sensations. Wandering central London means wandering through hundreds of jumbled, narrow streets and pedestrian promenades in the form of Covent Garden, Carnaby Street, Soho, and so many more distinctive districts where boutique shops, traditional British pubs, cafes, and bookstores cram into the elegant brick, stone, and plaster buildings. Perfumey fragrances, rich espresso, hearty food, and cigarette smoke fill your nostrils as you imagine a walk through the cobbled alleyways. This awful trend of minimalism that's really taken over the planet doesn't seem to have taken effect in London's neighborhoods like Soho, Carnaby Street, and Covent Garden, and I am so thankful for that. London's Chinatown brings an even greater sense of maximalism, with the narrow walkways vibrantly decked in red lanterns, street eateries, and tons of Eastern Asian markets and cafes. Wafts of delicious Chinese foods join the sounds of packed crowds chattering and trotting along the stone and clanking cutlery from the restaurants. This is certainly one of, if not the best Chinatowns I've had the privilege of strolling through. If the city of Westminster were a house, I guess Trafalgar Square would be the living room. Funnily enough, the actual official center of London is represented by the equestrian statue of Charles I, just south of Trafalgar. It's at this point where all the road distances to the city are measured. Damp beige stones, white marble, deep grays, and a bit of brown brick surround the fountain-adorned square, which is surrounded by a radius of tree-lined streets where pops of bright red from those iconic double-decker buses and picturesque red telephone booths and shiny black taxicabs stand out starkly against the muted facades. Scents of diesel fumes and chlorinated fountain water fill your nostrils in Trafalgar, while the sounds of engines, plenty of honking, sirens, and chattering, bustling crowds fill your ears. It's a stark reminder that London, for all of its postcard charm, is still one of the world's most important and fast-paced big cities. Nearby, Piccadilly Circus is almost London's equivalent to Times Square, and while not as bright, flashy, and humongous, it still gives you that sensation that you're in the center of the universe. As you imagine yourself emerging from the underground tube station into the plaza, you're gonna hear a ton of honking, bus engines rumbling, crowds of people, often screaming, street music bumping out into the air, and, of course, sirens. By night, Piccadilly Circus becomes immeasurably louder, brighter, and more chaotic with the gigantic LED screens flashing and rolling to match. Right around the corner is another glitzy, elegant boulevard, Shaftesbury Avenue, home to London's famous West End theatre district. A night out in this part of London is glitzy and flashy and kind of feels like a big party. To give context, it's the part of town where people are drunkenly pedaling on those little bars on wheels down the road. The sounds are overwhelmingly bustling here, and the golden floodlights, flashing marquees, warm brick and stone buildings, and narrow tree-lined streets, and that crisp, breezy evening air make you feel like you're in one of the most happening neighborhoods in the world. Being London, there's a decidedly royal ambience about the city, and it's not just because of the golden cast statues perched upon marble pillars that can be found virtually everywhere, or the golden crown markers placed on every red telephone booth, or yes, the actual word royal at every turn. Buckingham Palace, for one, is stately and elegant as one might expect, although admittedly smaller than it feels like it should be. I always get the same feeling when I walk past the White House in DC. Smaller feeling though it is, the British Royal Palace has 775 rooms.
I was so fortunate to come at the same time as the changing of the guard. Check this out.
As a grand promenade at the base of the palace is the lush, green oasis of the city of Westminster, St. James's Park. In many ways, this is like a smaller and more royal Central Park. Large ponds, dwelled in by resident geese, swans, and ducks, wind through the paths, which are lined by weeping willows, ferns, towering oaks, and flowering bushes. The lush green park is one where joggers, tourists, and working Londoners pass through on the regular. Small cafes pop up here and there, and you're occasionally greeted by the sounds of royal fanfare and military orders.
So don't you imagine yourself on a fall morning in St. James's Park? Well, first and foremost, you get the scent of pond water. It's a very distinctive smell, and it kind of smells like duck poop and geese poop. But, it's a pond, what do you expect? But you do also get that damp smell of fresh earth and fresh cut grass and a lot of the florals that are still in bloom this time of year. You'll hear the sounds of the geese and the swans in the pond, airplanes from overhead, birds chirping, mostly crows calling. Occasionally you'll hear the big bells of Big Ben from the Elizabeth Tower. Occasional horses trotting along the pavement and the cobbled stones. You'll hear people chattering and talking, tour guides giving tours of the park, kids playing out on the grass. You'll hear the breeze, rippling through the leaves. You'll hear the fountains, the trickling of the fountains in the various ponds.
The air is cool, breezy, and crisp in the park, much like in the rest of the city, adding to that comfortable, regal, and serene atmosphere. Nearby, the Palace of Westminster, the home of Britain's Parliament, and Westminster Abbey, the cathedral in which royal coronations are held, stand stately over the River Thames. The beautiful, Gothic, warm stone palace, ornately and decoratively chiseled, is breathtaking. Of course, the most famous part of this massive riverside structure is the Elizabeth Tower, whose clock historically kept London on time and whose deep and heavy bell, the famous Big Ben, rings out onto the city of Westminster every hour on the hour.
This is my third time to London, but it's the first time I've ever seen the Elizabeth Tower without scaffolding, and it is breathtaking.
There are a lot of really cool galleries and markets throughout town as well. While not exactly in the old city center, the Borough Market near the Shard and Leadenhall Market are both chaotic, full of too many smells to name, a bit stuffy, but straight up fun to explore. Leadenhall in particular has the look of a classic Victorian market with red and beige painted accents, silver dragons on the decorative columns, and a very quaint, quintessentially English feel. This is, of course, also the market that inspired the look of Diagon Alley in the Harry Potter film adaptations, and where the leaky cauldron hidden door is found in the first film. London merges that quirky, slightly eccentric 21st century Britain with an ambience of mystery thanks to the weight of 2,000 years of history and the rather melancholy gloom of Charles Dickens's London. Specifically in the Blackfriars area, narrow, brick, of various shades of brown, passageways, some with old medieval and Renaissance murals, wind crisscrossed over one another, many lined in stone cobbles. Smaller cafes and pubs, with the occasional modern chain, fill the tight and decorative storefronts. It's not hard to imagine yourself in a Dickensian London while tucked away into these small quarters where old rickety pub signs and planters hang from the stone and brick facades. The sounds of construction noise, footsteps on stone, and light chatter permeate the air, and the scents of stone and brick and that classic London musk fill your nostrils.
One of the most important pieces of London lore cuts right through the heart of it and has shaped the royal city's identity for millennia: the River Thames.
A murky, greenish-brown, the famous, wide, and choppy river has seen centuries of ships, merchants, and dark tales that have accompanied them. As you imagine yourself wandering along the riverside promenade under its many bridges, you'll notice the sounds of leaves rustling through the trees, church bells chiming from the nearby cathedrals, seagulls crying, crowds of people dining on the river's edge, trains screeching on tracks above, and boat horns. Wafts of cigarettes, river water, and, occasionally pee breeze past you in the warm, brisk air. Especially as you get closer to central London, you'll find a lot of cafe terraces, fun museums like Tate Modern, markets, and street food vendors along the river as well, bringing their own sense of delicious foods and the sounds of festive international pop music. There's even a skate park.
Now, occasionally, those riverside scents will be sweet, like sweets from a bakery, thanks to little markets like this one.
Now, speaking of that old, dark, melancholy Charles Dickens lore is something just as dark, but entirely unrelated.
Now, a lot of London's history is actually pretty dark and pretty morbid, and no place really captures that the same way as the Tower of London. You want to talk about dark and morbid, some of the stories that come out of this place are, well, they're a bit terrifying. Nonetheless, let's go check it out.
You know, I've still never been inside of a fortress as old as this one. The central keep, called the White Tower, was built in the 1000s. The bright beige stone is aged, worn, and patchy. The interiors are similar: dark, drafty, and cramped. The spiral staircases throughout the complex are tight, and there's not a lot of exterior light that makes it into the castle. It's cool to imagine what life must have been like nearly 1,000 years ago in this space. Walking outside along the battlements shows just how far we've come in the millennium since the Tower of London was built. You get a side-by-side look of London's odd but glimmering skyline in the background while standing on a stone and timber ledge that bears the weight of many centuries of bloodshed and conflict. It's kind of a strange feeling to carry. The passage of time does feel a lot more tangible and real here than it normally does. The Tower of London's dark history involved less medieval torture than in some places, but it's still medieval torture. It was literally nicknamed the Bloody Tower. Now, as you place yourself imaginatively into the keep of the White Tower, imagine scents of very old wood and sandstone, warm, stuffy air, and the sounds of wooden floors creaking, sound effects of medieval battles in the hidden speakers, and crowds of tourists and school groups squeezing through the narrow passages.
The White Tower even has the original ceiling fans dating back to the 20th century.
Outside, you may even hear the sounds of ravens cawing. There are always at least 6 kept here, although currently there are 9. Legend has it that if the number falls below 6, or if the ravens leave altogether, the royal crown of Britain and the tower itself will fall. One of London's most famous and iconic landmarks sits right next to the foreboding fortress and is often mistaken as the London Bridge. It's easy to understand why, but this twin-towered, Victorian masterpiece of a drawbridge is actually called Tower Bridge, thanks to its neighbor. This ornate, stone, modern engineering marvel is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful and mesmerizing bridges in the world, crossing over the wide, murky brown Thames with a sense of regality and poise. But, speaking of the bridge that you might have thought this was, if you didn't know this already, the London Bridge was, historically, always falling down in some capacity. The one that's standing today is, well, underwhelming. The only reason you even know it's the London Bridge, in fact, is by the small inscription in the modern concrete. One of the newest additions to London's collection of famous bridges is the Millennium Bridge. For all of you Potter fans out there, don't worry, the bridge is still fully intact after the events of the Half-Blood Prince, thanks to a little reparo action. Before traveling to London for the first time, the visual image I had in my head of the city heavily evoked those Charles Dickens vibes that I mentioned. The truth of the matter is that while you can whisk yourself away into the London of old imaginatively and its old cobbled streets and brick row houses, London is very much a megacity of the 21st century. The tallest building in London, at 1,016 feet and piercing the sky like a shard of glass, is appropriately named the Shard. If you've watched my vlog long enough, you know I never miss a chance to check out the views from the highest point in the city, and London was no exception.
You know, I try to never pass up the opportunity to go to the highest point in whatever city I'm visiting. If you find yourself in London, do not pass up on going to the top of the Shard, because it is absolutely worth seeing this amazing city from this vantage point.
London from above is mind-boggling. The remarkable landmarks that seem larger than life from the ground become a part of the fabric of glass skyscrapers in eclectic shapes, silver and bronze domes, spires and steeples, roof lines of white and gray, and a jumble of low-rise boxes. The murky greenish-brown Thames winds through, rippling from the dozens of boats and ships, while trains, double-decker buses, black cabs, cars, and bikes keep the city moving at high speed.
My only qualm is you can't see my favorite building from here.
Now maybe you're wondering, what building is that, Michael? Well, to find out, we're heading right into that big jumble of weirdly shaped skyscrapers. So there's London, or Greater London, and then there's the formal ancient city of London, a small area that is known colloquially as the Square Mile. This is the city's financial district and home to some of my favorite modern building designs on Earth. The skyscrapers popping up around this area show what I mean when I say quirky and eccentric 21st century city. The cheese grater and the walkie-talkie are two fun examples and look exactly like colossal glass and steel versions of their nickname counterparts. My favorite of these strange skyscraper shapes is the Gherkin, shaped like a cucumber.
To this day, the Gherkin is still my favorite modern building in the world, and I don't know why. I mean, come on guys, look at that thing.
At the street level, walking through the city almost feels intrusive. Everything feels important. There's a lot of metal and glass, stock tickers in the window fronts, elegant white stone buildings, and a lot of people in black suits. In a way, you almost feel like you could be walking through any central business district in the world. There are a lot of beige buildings with ornamental Baroque-looking architecture, similar to over at Piccadilly and Trafalgar. As a financial district, naturally, there are a ton of banks and even more suits and ties.
Now, personally, I think London is magical on its own. But if you want to take that to the next level, the Warner Brothers studio tour in Watford is a must.
Before heading to the studio tour, we've got to head to King's Cross Station, where Hogwarts students famously take the Hogwarts Express up to the Scottish Highlands. The dull, brown brick station is a perfect metaphor for that transition between the Muggle and magical world. Here you get a sense of routine and day-to-day work, with passengers lining in quietly en route to wherever they're heading. Outside the train hall sits a recreation of the barrier to platform 9 3/4, where you can grab a picture with a luggage trolley stuck halfway between worlds. Naturally, there's a Harry Potter-themed shop just next door. It's after the train ride to Watford, however, that the real magic kicks in. Let me just say that if you didn't grow up from the age of 5 rereading the Harry Potter books or falling asleep to the Harry Potter films, you might not be able to relate to this at the same level. But when the doors to the Great Hall of Hogwarts opened in front of me for the first time, I could have cried. Walking on the actual floors that I had spent my entire childhood life fantasizing about walking on, standing in a spot that seemingly only existed in my imagination or on a screen, was out of body. I remember feeling such a high and a rush of adrenaline the first time. Now, this was my third time in the hall, which I've seen previously in its traditional state and decorated for Christmas. This time, the Great Hall was decked out for Halloween, floating jack-o'-lanterns and all. The studio tour is a truly magical experience. Sets like the Gryffindor Common Room, the Headmaster's Office, Diagon Alley, Gringotts, the Burrow, Privet Drive, the Hogwarts greenhouses, and so much more bring the wizarding world to a scale that feels so real and so tangible. The 1:24 scale model of Hogwarts Castle, used for the exterior shots in the films, is so much larger than any picture or video can do justice, and it's incredibly surreal. Over and over again, you have to remind yourself that this is what you grew up seeing on screen, and that you're actually there, in person. We've all heard the reputation before. British food is bland, dull, and unseasoned. You know, one of my favorite adages goes something along the lines of, they colonized the entire world for spices, and they didn't use a single one of them. But, is this reputation fair? I don't think so, personally. Here are some of the delicious foods I tried that I feel like capture the taste of London. Fish and chips. There's no other way to start than with the most classic of them all. Fried, rich, and salty Atlantic cod, which should almost always be paired with malt vinegar and lemon juice, is just better tasting in the UK. I don't know how to explain it. The chips, or fries, if they're top-notch, are crunchy, golden, and crispy. In the UK, they're usually accompanied by mushy peas. I had my classic plate at a very quintessential-looking neighborhood pub near Camden Town. Steak and ale pie with mash. Pies and mash were the original British fast food. At Hung, Drawn and Quartered near the Tower of London, established in 1845, I dug into a steak and ale pie. If you're American, the best way to describe this is like a steak pot pie. The mash, or mashed potatoes, come doused in gravy, the spillover of which adds a nice little savory kick to the little side salad of cabbage and peas. Duck hash. At a super touristy but very delicious pub near Westminster Abbey, I tried duck hash, which consists of a slow-cooked confit of duck leg, fried potatoes, smoked bacon and cabbage, and a runny fried egg, all doused by an orange and blackcurrant dressing. This was incredibly hearty, moist, and nap-inducing. A full English breakfast. A full English breakfast usually consists of bacon, fried eggs, toast, tomato, a variety of sausage, and baked beans. Now, if you didn't know baked beans were a breakfast food, you do now. They're actually pretty great when paired with bacon, and the sauce itself is easily soaked up with toast. Like duck hash, finishing this heavy meal can certainly prompt a mid-morning nap. Bangers and mash. Meat and potatoes kind of make their way into everything in the British classics, don't they? Bangers and mash, essentially sausage and mashed potatoes, are a hearty and super filling meal that, at least in this case, comes accompanied by mushed up peas. It's a good thing I like peas. Tea and scones. Tea time in London is as British as it gets. An English breakfast tea straight from the pot, mixed with a bit of milk to sweeten the flavor, is a delicious way to accompany the next British classic, scones. Fruit scones with jam, in particular. If you're American, they're like biscuits. If you're from the deep south, they're like Bojangles' Bowberry biscuits. Pale ale. The local pub is an essential part of the day-to-day in England. At the neighborhood tavern in nearby Camden Town, I cozied up with a citrusy, fizzy pale ale after a sleepless night on the airplane. Maybe that was why it tasted so refreshing. Experiencing London isn't something you can do holistically in one visit. In fact, I doubt anyone could ever truly grasp the entirety of this capital of capitals in a lifetime. As Samuel Johnson, the author of the very first dictionary, once famously said, "When a man is tired of London, he's tired of life." My hope is that in diving in with me today, you've been able to capture some of the sensations that I experienced in London, and that you were able to place yourself imaginatively into this amazing British city that has sparked a desire to experience the world in its entirety for so many people. As always, thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.